Hello everyone, welcome back to the top 10 commanders of July, where we will be looking firstly at the most popular commander and then to the other ones, because I think you should be able to choose when you think it's not interesting anymore. So like every time, whenever a card returns in the top 10, for a certain amount of times, we get a different type of way to look at it. And today with Istola we get to look at the art. So first off we have one from an MTG artist, Magali Villeneuve, where she is very good at depicting characters. So I think it's perfect for a set like Final Fantasy to have her do some arts and really get the vibe of a character right. And I think that is something that is really cool to share with fans of games that usually don't get this type of art, where you get to look at a still piece and know what the character is about even without playing the games, because you can already see what Isola is like from the art, from the lighting, from the little claw, from the dark light, from the way her eyes are veiled in shadow and the rest of her face is veiled in light. There are so many things that you can already see. I think I'm probably saying a lot of things that aren't really true for the character perhaps, but if I am, that's really sick. And then we have on the other side the art of Nakamura, which is so different, so guessing Nakamura must know a lot, but also might just be that this is the thing people want to see. But I think with this type of full art cards, we get to see a more, well, let's say cute side, but also really the small things that are about the character design here as well, where I think the arms are, or like the cuffs are a little bit smaller, but we also see her arms protruding from it, almost as if they are magic themselves, and more of the flowing dress that comes with the character. So I think that is really cool that you see how someone affiliated more with Final Fantasy would depict a character, and how one that has at least a lot of experience with depicting characters on a magic card would do it. Then we have Fivy Orniche, and this one is here for the third time as well. Second most popular commander still. And as you can see, Final Fantasy is still in the most popular commander very dominantly. This list is really ruled by Final Fantasy characters. And I think that is just also because of the great match between the two games, because many people who love Final Fantasy also might love Magic the Gathering on one side, but also I think people from Final Fantasy really love to see the arts on these cards and are just maybe gathering these cards because they love the art, and maybe they like a treat and something to celebrate the older Final Fantasy games with, that perhaps they have forgotten. Maybe Fivy isn't one of the oldest, but you get what I mean. And with this art, I think this is seen by Magic fans a lot as well, because Fivy was really good in the Izzet archetype that was very dominant in Standard. But I think if we really appreciate the art a bit more, we see the whimsical aspect of Fivy, and the way Magic just is a little bit chaotic around the Black Mage. That really shows, I think, what Fivy is about. And we see a lot of connection to nature. And if you really, really look at the art, you see that Fivy right here is upside down. So we see the playfulness as well from the character. And then with the art from Toshiyuki Itahana, we see even perhaps more of it. This is the only art that is done by them for Magic the Gathering, at least. And I think you really see how this is just such a playful art itself, with the character in the background, character extra in the foreground. And I think fans of Fivy just really feel this one. And then the last one that is here for the third time is Sepharov, the Fabled Soldier. I think he got instantly popular because, I guess, of the Final Fantasy VII fans all around. And I think Sepharov is perhaps I'm not sure, but perhaps the most memorable character. Also one that it has a really interesting mechanic that has been done a lot, I guess, but that many people really like, which is aristocrats. But looking at the art, I think it's easier to look at it through these. We have another magic artist, Wisnu Tan, which has done a lot of other magic arts that are a little bit more on the darker, edgy side, let's say. And Sepharov, of course, really fits into that archetype. Here we see how Wisnu has shown the dynamic poses that Sepharov will make him rememberable. I think we really see how this could spring into action really quick, even though there is no action right now, either through the sword itself or through Sepharov aiming his arm at the earth and maybe at us to perhaps destroy it. So I think this definitely shows what he is about. And then looking at Maji, we see someone who has done, I think, multiple of these types of arts for Final Fantasy set. So many Final Fantasy arts coming from Maji. And I think Maji has done some magic art before too, with Kamigawa, but always, themed in a way. With Sepharov, I think we really see how, again, we are looking more at the character. And I think we are more looking at the details and like how for example, with the one-winged angel, how the wing is growing out of his arm in a sort of gruesome way, and this other arm is getting purpled as well, and the humanity is flowing away from him. But also on the left side, we see that the humanity wasn't really there inside of him all along, because we see him looking almost empty and not really at us, which many other arts like these are. And I think that really shows how Sepharov is scheming and looking ahead into the future, which is also, of course, a great match for the black color in Magic. And then we have Tessuya Nomura. Maybe I'm butchering the names, I'm sorry if that's the case, but which really shows a more gritty type of art, which is new to Magic the Gathering, because this type of art tends to scream at us, and that's something that usually we don't really get in Magic, because it takes away from the cards themselves sometimes. But here we get to see how Final Fantasy is more of a collector set, perhaps. I think it's cool that we get these versions as well. Of course, you can always choose to buy other cards that aren't like this, but I think I love how the arts work together in this sense, because in Fabled Soldier you already see a bit of the wings coming from the one-winged angel, and we get to see a bit of the light coming from the one-winged angel as well. We see it coming from the upper right, the side that the one-winged angel is coming from. And on the right side, we see him looking down, and we have a little bit more of the darker side of the Fabled Soldier still in the art of the one-winged angel. So I think I love how it's working together. You can see how it is not really focusing on the details like the one wing growing out from a body, but this is more so looking at the feel and the transformation between the two versions of the cards, which I love for a transformed card, but really isn't made for the gameplay, but more of a story piece, maybe even, and a big flex on knowing Sepharov as a character. Well, and Cloud being a little bit behind, but still running after Sepharov, is still popular in this month and is returning for the second time. All of the cards, let's be honest, from this point onwards, are here for the second time, so we will not be looking at their arts today, but at the cards that are good with them. Because I like to see if a card is popular for multiple months, why is it that people still like to play with the card after its initial popularity has perhaps worn off because of its novelty? Well, maybe in this case with Cloud, it's just also because people like to play the main character. But let's read the card again. It's Cloud X Soldier. For 5 mana you get a haste creature. that when it enters, you can attach up to one target equipment you control to it. So these can be very big equipments. Then whenever Cloud attacks, you draw a card for each equipped attacking creature you control. Then, if Cloud has 7 or more power, you create 2 treasure tokens as well. So making sure that Cloud gets at least 3 power from his equipment that you attach onto him will make sure that you get another 2 treasures from attacking. But otherwise, I think the most powerful part of this is the fact that you can attack with multiple equipped creatures and draw some cards for them. So that is, I think, the thing you want the most, but also 2 treasures isn't bad. So what do you want with this? Well, you want cards that are great with equipments like Armiger Unleashed or Forge Anew, which is an enchantment that when it enters, you return an equipment from the graveyard to the battlefield. And during your turn, you may activate equip abilities anytime you could use an instant. So that means you can attack, for example, with Cloud and immediately attach another equipment to him. And then you may pay 0 rather than pay the equip cost for the first equip ability you activate during each of your turns. So basically you have Cloud's enter the battlefield effect on each of your turns. I love effects like these, which are doubling the thing that your commander does, because sometimes you don't have your commander out and you still want that powerful aspect of your commander. Then you will need cards that are very expensive to equip in this deck, because for example with Colossus Hammer, which is a 1 mana equipment but you need to equip for 8 mana, will give your creature +10/+10, and if you can put it for free on Cloud, you can immediately attack with a 14/14, draw an extra card and get 2 treasures. But you are attacking with the 14/14, so that should be the strongest part there. And then of course cards like Tifa, which are which want to play with power 7 or greater, which is also something that Cloud of course works with, the 7 being the number in the Final Fantasy game. Well, will be strong as well. So you want perhaps strong creatures or equipments that give a lot of power, and then things that work well with a lot of power. So for example with Tifa, she says whenever 1 or more creatures you control with power 7 or greater deal combat damage to a player, you untap all creatures you control, and if it's the first combat phase of your turn, there will be an additional combat phase after this phase. So you get another combat, at least, well, you get 2, which is of course strong if you get to attack with the 14/14 again. Then Kefka, which is from another game, but I think very, well, people just love the Sepharov vibes, let's say that. Well, here we have a classical Grixis commander, a 5 mana commander, so you need to be controlling ahead of playing Kefka, which is something Grixis loves to do. That whenever it enters or attacks, each player discards a card, so you as well. Then you draw a card for each card type among cards discarded this way. So if you can discard another card type that is not usual, perhaps you will be able to draw another card. And for 8 you get to transform Kefka, and each opponent sacrifices a permanent of their choice when you do this. But it's 8 mana, so you need to be really late in the game. So you need to be controlling ahead of this. And you will need a way to win with the Ruler of Ruin. The Ruler of Ruin says whenever an opponent loses life during your turn, you draw that many cards. So you get to draw a bunch of cards, but you also need ways to damage your opponents over and over so that you can win when the Ruler of Ruin is out after paying 8 mana. So you will need to be very far into the game, so you will need a lot of control. So what is good with this? Well, Psychosis Crawler is an example of a way to go off with this, or at least the transformed version, which, let's read again, says whenever an opponent loses life, you draw that many cards. If you have a way to, when you draw a card, make each opponent lose a life, you get an infinite loop. Same thing with Nip Mizzet Perun. These are ways to go off with your flipped commander, immediately drawing you all the cards and immediately hopefully defeating your opponent. So that is one way that you can instantly win, but you will need even more setup because these are 5 and 6 mana. Otherwise, I would say get a lot of cards that deal a bit of damage and make sure that you can win after that, but that will cost you a lot of mana as well. So just be sure to put a lot of control into here as well. Another thing that you can of course work with is the Court Mage ability, which has make people discard cards. So for example, Waste Not says whenever an opponent discards a creature, you create a 2/2. Whenever an opponent discards a land, you get 2 mana, which you can use to transform Kefka perhaps. And whenever an opponent discards a non-creature non-land card, you draw a card. If you are lucky and you make sure that your opponents discard 6 lands, then you will be able to get 12 mana, which will be enough to transform Kefka and almost play Psychosis Crawler. So that is the dream, of course. Playing Kefka, giving him haste in some way, attacking with him as well, get to trigger his ability twice, make your opponents discard 6 lands, and then transforming Kefka. Well, that would be the dream. But I'm not saying that will happen. Then Kucha, the Genome Sorcerer, another flip card, which is of course usual in Final Fantasy because they wanted the opponents to return multiple times because they very well linked the stories with the gameplay. And having him return as a with his trance ability, well, that is really cool. Of course, sometimes there are also just cases in which bosses and enemies or your own characters just transform. So that is also, of course, something why many Final Fantasy characters transform. But let's talk about the mechanics. That's why we're here today. At the beginning of your end step, you create a tapped 0/1 Black Wizard creature token with, when you play a non-creature spell, this token deals 1 damage to each opponent. Then, if you have 4 or more wizards, of which Kucha is 1, so you have, for example, 3 of those other Black Wizard tokens, you get to transform Kucha. So again, already you see that you want to play a bunch of non-creature spells and you want them to be small so that you get to deal a bunch of 1 damages to each opponent. Transformed in his trance ability, Kucha, Fate Defied, says if a wizard you control would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage instead. So meaning that all of your Black Wizard creature tokens already deal 2 damage to each opponent whenever you play a non-creature spell. This also means that with 3 0/1 Black Wizard creature tokens on the battlefield, for every non-creature spell you play, you will deal 6 damage to each opponent. So that's already a strong start. So what do you want to play with this? Well, you want other cards that create those 0/1 Black Wizard creature tokens. This one, Circle of Power, also works very well with them because wizards will get lifelink, meaning that you will drain your opponents for life whenever your wizards deal damage to opponents. Harmonic Prodigy is great because you get to double the amount of triggers from wizards. Of course, doubling the triggers from your Black Wizards, but also from the Genome Sorcerer side of Kucha. And things that just work very well with small instants or sorceries are really great. You play with non-creatures, by the way, so these could also be artifacts or enchantments, but that is usually not what Rakdos, the colors black and red, are going for. So usually in these kinds of decks, you want to play instants and sorceries. And Stormkiln Artist is a great way to play with them because whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery, you create a treasure. So if you have a bunch of sorceries that are 1 mana, which you probably want in this deck, you will create another treasure, making you the mana needed to play another one of those spells. Then we have a Mill Commander, which usually aren't that popular, so I'm guessing the character Hope Estheim is very popular in its game. Final Fantasy 13. Hope Estheim is all about milling cards. So at the beginning of your end step, each opponent mills X cards, where X is the amount of life you gain this turn. So you do need to also gain life. So you need 2 things that work with milling and things that work with life gaining. It is hard in Commander to mill out your opponents because, of course, they have 100 cards and you need to mill all of them or have them draw those cards. So what do you need? Well, cards that work well or help you mill your opponents. Will Scion of Peace, for example, has a tap ability that says spells you cast this turn that are white and or blue, which are all of them probably, except for the colorless ones. Cost X less to cast, where X is the amount of life you gain this turn. Activate only as a sorcery. So this will enable you to work with that life gain, make your spells a lot cheaper, and then be able to play all those mill cards that you need. Soul Warden is a card that gives you life. You need a bunch of things that give you life. And then you have Bruvak, the Grandiloquent, which is a card that works very well with mill himself. Because he says if an opponent would mill one or more cards, they mill twice that many cards instead. You need this because Hope S-Time, for example, is a card that works with milling your opponents a bunch at once. So he says at the beginning of your end step, each opponent mills X one time, where X is the amount of life you gain this turn. You will probably be able to easily gain 10, 12 life each turn, but you should be able to sometimes combo off and gain maybe 100 life. For the times you mill your opponents 12, I think Bruvak is great because he doubles the power of your commander. Then also returning we have Terra, the Magical Adept, a 3 mana creature that works with enchantments. Terra, when she enters, you mill 5 cards and you put 1 enchantment into your hand from the milled cards. Then the trance ability of Terra is 6 mana to exile and transform Terra. Only at a sorcery, so you will need 6 mana. You need to ramp a little bit, but you are in green, so this should be easy. Then you create a token that's a copy of target non-legendary enchantment you control. It gains haste, and if it is a saga, put up to 3 lore counters on it, so you may choose on which chapter that saga creature gets to enter on. And then you sacrifice it at the beginning of your next end step. So you get to use them, but you only get to use them once. Then for the 4th chapter, you get to add 2 mana of every color, and then you also exiled Esper Terra and return it to the battlefield, meaning you already get another trigger of the Terra Magical Adept ETB effect, milling another 5 cards and getting another enchantment milled this way into your hand. So you get to keep going off with Terra every time. Cards that are good. Well, this one is very, very good. Yenna, Red Tooth Regent is 4 mana for a creature that you can then tap for 2 mana to choose target enchantment you control that doesn't have the same name as another permanent you control. You create a token that's a copy of it, except it isn't legendary. And that means, going back to Esper Terra, that you get to copy Esper Terra, make it non-legendary, and then you create a token that's a copy of itself. It gains haste, and it's a saga, so you get to put up the 3 lore counters on it if you want. You have to sacrifice it at the beginning of your next end step, but that new token can also target itself or the other version of Esper Terra, making sure that you get infinite haste flying 6/6 Esper Terras. So that's really good. Other than that, you have 5 colors, so you will be there will be a great chance to play Tom Bombadil in this deck. So, well, merging worlds already. Tom Bombadil is just a card that is great with sagas himself. As long as there are 4 or more lore counters among sagas, he has indestructible and hexproof, meaning he is a god. And whenever the final chapter of a saga you control resolves, you reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal another saga card. You put it onto the battlefield and the rest on the bottom. And this triggers only once each turn. So every turn you get another saga from the top of your library, and this also goes off very well. Of course, with the transformed 4th chapter of Terra, you can immediately play Tom Bombadil and another Wooburg card. Then you have Citizen Champion, which is just a card very popular for a long time in Standard. That works well with enchantments, because whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield, you draw a card. and put a +1 counter on the Centescent Champion. In Commander, you usually just care about the drawing of a card. Then birds. Birds really are, I think, only popular because people love chocobos. But this one says whenever one or more birds you control attack, you look at that many cards from the top of your library and put one of them into your hand, then put any number of land cards from among them onto the battlefield and the rest into your graveyard. Graveyard stuff in this color typing isn't the best, but you do get to put a bunch of lands onto the battlefield, and at least you get to choose one of the cards that you want in your hand. And landfall, whenever a land enters, Choco gets 1 power. That's not the strongest. But cards that work well, other chocobos of course. This one, Traveling Chocobo, the really expensive one, says you may look at the top card of your library anytime. You may play lands and birds from the top of your library, so perfect in this deck. And if a land or bird enters, or if a land or bird you control entering the battlefield causes a triggered ability of a permanent you control to trigger, it triggers an additional time. Meaning that you get those double landfall triggers, for example. Then you want other things that work well with birds, which are usually in white and blue, not really in green. But this one, for example, says that whenever one or more birds deal common damage to a player, you get to either draw a card, put a +1 counter on each bird you control, or you may put another bird from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield with a finality counter on it. Meaning that those cards that you put into the graveyard can then be put to use again. And you have cards like Chocobo Racetrack that work with landfall very well. This one especially so because you will be able to create a 2/2 bird token with that landfall ability again. So there is something here, and I think this is just a fun deck to build. And last, and I guess therefore least in this video, the Wandering Minstrel, which is a 2-mana human that loves to travel around towns. So the Wandering Minstrel says lands you control enter untapped, which helps to battle the downside of towns which often enter untapped or enter tapped. So you can immediately use them. At the beginning of combat on your turn, if you control 5 or more towns, you create a 2/2 with all colors. I would say not the strongest ability, but just there for the flavor, I think. And then for 8 mana, among which you Wooburg, other creatures get +X, where X is the number of towns you control. Honestly, looking at the middle card, Omo, Queen of Vesuva, I feel like Omo is the better commander for towns, but you can't really play the Wandering Minstrel in there because it is all 5 colors. Ishgard the Holy Sea is a great card in the Wandering Minstrel deck because it is a town. It is flavorful for being in the same Final Fantasy game, and no, that's just it. Other than that, you want things that give you a bunch of lands because you will need them. For example, Summon Titan says mill 5 cards, you return all land cards from the graveyard to the battlefield tapped, and then eventually onto end of turn another creature gets trample and +X, where X the number of lands you control. So you can at least give that Wandering Minstrel ability to one creature and it will gain trample. The real downside of the Wandering Minstrel's ability is that it doesn't give trample, meaning that your creatures might be big, but they can also be blocked by small creatures. Of course, you will want to play Omo, Queen of Vesuva still in this deck. Omo says whenever she enters the battlefield or attacks, you put an everything counter on each of up to 1 target land and 1 target creature. So a land that isn't a town yet will become another town. Then each land with an everything counter on it will be a town. And sometimes might be useful, every creature with an everything counter on it is every creature type. Meaning, for example, if you have a light elemental sub-theme, you will be able to make an elemental out of another creature. So that was it for this video. Let me know which ones you want to really play, and if there is something you'd like to change about these videos, let me know as well. But otherwise, I wish you a very nice day, and I wish to thank you for watching.